Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the program. This is your opportunity to learn about pathways to licensure, to architectural licensure, and get your questions answered. Thank you all for coming. I'm Denora Meyer, and I am one of the assistant directors, which is really one of the career counselors, also known as career educators from Berkeley Career Engagement. And we have with us a couple of advisors from CED, from architecture. So if you guys would like to introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Sonora. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to see a handful of undergraduate students here today for this presentation. My name is Mel Barbers. I'm an undergraduate advisor and wellness coordinator in CED, and I'll go ahead and pass it to Ari.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Ari Baird. I'm one of the GSAOs for architecture. And like Mel, I am also happy to see several of our graduate students here today.
Great, thanks, Mel and Ari. And just to say, I also am the career counselor for students at CED undergrad and master's level students. So if you haven't met with me and want help with your career development, I encourage you to make an appointment with me in Handshake, and I'm happy to see you all here. Before we move into our content and we move into allowing our guests to begin, I'm going to ask that you guys respond to a poll. Just want to ask just a couple of very quick questions to get a sense of your knowledge level around our topic here. So the first question is, prior to today's program, how knowledgeable are you about pathways to licensure, to architecture licensure? Thank you all for answering. And then the second question is, prior to today's program, how confident do you feel planning your licensure process? So we have people in pretty much all the categories, except for extremely knowledgeable and, people just obviously just learning and not confident yet. So hopefully these numbers will go up by the time we finish. I'll be doing another poll at the end. Thank you all for sharing your responses. I don't actually know what you can see, so I'm just showing you what people are saying. So I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to move on to introducing Aaron Forrest, who can actually do a better job of introducing himself than I can. So on to you, Aaron. Thank you for coming and speaking with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. So yeah, I'm now the NCARB advisor for the Department of Architecture. And what else? I am a faculty member in the Department of Architecture. I know many people who are on this call already. Yeah, I'm an associate adjunct professor of architecture. I mostly teach studios, but also occasionally seminars in the department. And I have an architecture design practice called Ultramodern. And I am a licensed architect, which I think is why I was asked to be the NCARB advisor for the department. I have a short presentation to share with all of you. And then we can kind of take a look at a couple of websites together that I think are going to be very useful. And then the rest of the time, I think we can just do some Q&A. So let me just pull up my screen here. Okay, so if I can hit present. Everyone can see this okay? Yeah. Okay, great. So presumably you're here because you're interested in the architecture licensure process. and I'm going to share with you some of my knowledge. One of the things to know about architecture licensure is that it is sort of complicated. It's different in every single state. And we'll go through a little bit of what the process is like in California, but every state is a little bit different. My initial license was in New York State, and I am now licensed in California as well. Yasmin Vobis, my partner, who many of you probably know, is licensed in Rhode Island. And we practice in both places. But we aren't both licensed in both places because it costs money and it's, a lot of paperwork and stuff like that. So that's something to always keep in mind. So I think there's a couple of questions that you'll want to ask yourself as you're kind of going through your education right now. One question is, should I get a license? And I think it's important to recognize that a license is not required for all forms of practice. It's not required for all career paths in architecture. And it's a bit of a process to get one. And so you kind of have to ask yourself if that's something that makes sense for you. So a couple things. First of all, you can work for an office that has a licensed architect as a principal without a license. It probably won't affect your ability to work there in most cases, because in most offices only the principal is the one who is going to be stamping drawings or doing any kind of official submissions. That's just the nature of the way the way most offices operate. And so if you're not thinking about like starting your own firm, and being not interested in becoming a principal, you can have a great career without getting a license. You can also practice as a designer in the state of California and in many states without getting a license. So you do need a license to call yourself an architect, to use the word architect to describe yourself in California, and I believe in pretty much every state. But in California, you can basically do the work of an architect and have your own practice doing small scale projects without getting licensed. So you can actually design and submit for permit basically small scale residential projects, and I think a few small scale commercial projects as well. There are very strict limitations on what you can do, like a house up to 2 stories is permitted, and it has to be wood frame. It can't be like concrete or steel. But you can do a lot that way. You can also kind of team up with other architects. I do think that if you're going to have a practice doing architecture, it makes a lot of sense to get the license. It certainly gives you more authority when you're dealing with contractors, with permitting agencies, with clients, etc. There's just a lot of knowledge that goes into it, and it gives you a lot more flexibility. And you can imagine, like, you design a house and it turns out you need like some steel in it, and or that, maybe you need to do a 3rd story for whatever reason. All of a sudden you're going from a situation where you can work on your own to actually having to find another architect to team up with. It can get very expensive for your clients. It can be super awkward. So I definitely recommend getting the license if you're planning to practice on your own. And if you are working in a larger office, like a corporate office, getting a license can get you a promotion. So that's another thing. It can also help you kind of move up the ladder and become a principal which is a desirable thing just in terms of, salary, etc. And having like being able to lead projects, etc. So there are good reasons. I think the flip side to all of this is that not everyone who goes to architecture school becomes a practicing architect. People go into teaching, for example, or they go work for let's say like a material fabrication company. And there's really probably not a requirement that you get licensed in those cases. But sometimes it's useful. And someone like me, I teach, but I also practice. And so I have my own office with Yasmin. So for us, it's really important to be licensed. So presuming you still want to get licensed or still considering it, there's a couple different ways that you can go about it. And one is that you can, after you graduate from Berkeley, you can get a certain number of years of work experience, and then you can take then you can do the architectural experience program, and then you can take your exams. This should say, my apologies, work experience plus AXP plus exams. You always have to take the exams. The other way is that you can go, if you're an undergraduate, you can go to a master's program at an NAAB accredited school. So you get an MArch, an NAAB accredited MArch degree. Then you can, as soon as you start that, you can start doing the architectural experience program, and then your exams as well. If you're a master's student in the MArch program, then you are already on path number 2. You probably know that already. If you are a post-professional master's student in the MAAD program, your situation may be a little bit different depending on where you're coming from. If you're a US student, you probably have a BArch coming into that program, which should be an NAAB accredited degree. If you are not from the United States, you might have the equivalent of a BArch from a foreign school, and there is a path to get a license in a US state with that as well, but it's slightly more complicated. I realize there's a lot of acronyms here, so I just have a kind of quick glossary slide. NCARB is the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. Basically, every state has their own registration board. That's the kind of administrative agency that you apply to for a license. But they have this national organization where they try to align their standards. And that's called NCARB. NAAB is the accreditation board for architecture schools. AXP is Architectural Experience Program. That's basically the kind of internship program. It used to be called IDP when I was doing it, an intern development program, but now they changed it to Architectural Experience Program. But they basically kind of make sure that you're doing the work requirements. And then ARE is the Architecture Registration Exam, and CSE, for those of you who are considering getting licensed in California, there's an extra exam that you have to take. So there's this is just a chart going through those 2 different paths that I outlined above. If you're going to go to grad school, or if you have a BArch already, that degree then kind of fast tracks you into the architecture experience program. which is actually codified as number of hours of experience, and it's really about like 2 years of worth of hours, but most people take 3-ish years to get all the different experience areas filled out. It can take longer or shorter depending on exactly what your job experience is. And then after that, you can take the ARE, which is 6 exams. And if you're in California, you take the California Supplemental Examination. Not all states have an additional exam. California, there's only a few, and California is one of them. And the exam has to do with California specific laws around practice mostly. And then once you do that, once you do all of that, you get your you can get your initial license, and you can get your NCARB certificate, which is this special piece of paper, but it's probably just a PDF now, that basically allows you to very easily apply for a license in another state. So if you get your California license, and then all of a sudden you get a project in Nevada, if you have your NCARB certificate, you can basically just have it sent over to Nevada, the Nevada licensing board, and they'll and it probably takes them like 2 months, but they'll basically give you the license, provided they don't have any other special requirements, which some states do. So that's the path if you have the accredited degree. And since most people here probably don't have a B.Arch or aren't going to be getting a B.Arch, usually the Berkeley Bachelor's of Architecture, Bachelor of Arts in Architecture or Bachelor's of Science in Architecture at some schools, which is 4 years, plus the M.Arch, which can be range anywhere from 2 to 4 years, depending on your exact background, means that you're in school for 6 to 8 years total. And then and then you can do AXP and ARE. I should say that you can do, once you start your NAAB accredited degree, I believe you're eligible to start recording AXP hours. So summer internships while you're doing your master's degree, that kind of thing, you can start recording towards your AXP hours. You can also start your exams as soon as you establish your NCARB record. So there is a way in certain schools to basically come out ready to be licensed, but it's pretty hard, and most people don't follow that, and Berkeley is not one of those schools. So it has to be a very special school that has this thing called an integrated path to licensure. Yeah, it takes a little while. The exams are hard. It took me two or 3 years to take all the exams. I was 7 when I was taking them. Yeah, it's a process. If you do work, take the work experience path. It's completely valid. You actually don't even need a bachelor's degree to pursue this path. I do believe you need the equivalent of high school diploma. And you have to work for 5 years, 40 hours a week. And then once you've recorded that and gotten it approved in the state of California by the California Architects Board, then you can move on to the AXP and do another, 2 or 3 years of experience. You cannot use the work experience you gained in lieu of degree for AXP. So we're talking about 5 years plus 3 years, so 8 years total, which is equal to the longest path through the NAB accredited degree. Now, They will, my understanding is they will give you credit, partial credit for getting your bachelor's degree with a major in architecture. But it's discretionary based on your transcript. So if you're interested in that path, you should reach out to California Architects Board and find out how much time they'll cut off. Then you still have to do the exams as well. And then you can then get your NCARB certificate and your license, your initial license in California, and you can get reciprocal licensure in other states that do not require a NAB accredited degree. A lot of states do require the NA, or several. I don't know if it's a lot. It's at
38
least a handful required. Yeah.
38 out of the 55 jurisdictions require a NAB accredited degree for license.
38 out of 55. So California is one of the few that doesn't, is
Yes.
what that means. Yeah. Thank you, Ari.
For sure.
Yeah. So, but you can see the differences here. There are now, you can ask yourself, do you want to go to, for the people who are not graduate students, do you want to go to grad school? It's kind of up to you. It depends what you want to do. I generally, I think there are valuable things about getting a master's degree beyond giving you the ability to apply for more licenses in more states. And you should probably base your decision on whether you want that educational experience more so than the credential. But like I said, there are many factors at play. So there's two really important websites to look at, and we're going to actually look at them in a second. One is the NCARB website, ncarb.org, and the other is California Architects Board. You really need to, if you're a California person, you really need to look at both. If you are not a California person and you're thinking you're going to go back to your home state and work towards your license there, or go to New York City and work towards your license there, whatever, then you're going to want to look at the jurisdiction that you're working in. Now, can you go and live in, I don't know, Florida and still apply for your license in California? Yeah, absolutely. There's no restriction on you applying for your initial license somewhere else. But most people do it in the place where they're actually living and practicing. Okay, so that's what I have for PowerPoint. We can take a jump to the websites, and I can just give a quick tour, and then I can take some questions. Okay. Can everyone see my browser? Yeah. Okay. And font size is okay? Yeah, okay. Okay, so NCARB website, it's actually gotten to be quite good and can help probably answer many, if not most, of the questions that you might have. And you can see they have, these tabs up at the top: become an architect, earn a degree, gain experience, pass the ARE, NCARB certificate, etc. If you go to become an architect, so you can see they have their own kind of pathways to practice section. They have all this earn your architecture license and licensing requirement tools. This is actually super useful. And maybe the main thing that you want to know about is the licensing requirement tools. So if you click on that and you go here, you can see they have a nice little map of the United States. And one thing you can do is you can just click on your state, California, and it highlights all of the requirements to get a license in California. So can be done online. Additional work experience can be accepted as an alternative to a degree from a NAB accredited program. You can use a Canadian degree, etc. AXP is required. You can use a portfolio in lieu of the AXP hours. You have to take the exam. You can start taking the exam before you complete AXP. They accept integrated path to licensure, etc. So there's all these kind of very jurisdiction specific things. If we click on, a specific requirement, it'll also show us all the states that have that. So I just clicked on additional work experience can be accepted as an alternative to a degree. And all of these blue states are the ones where you can practice without a degree, provided you have the work experience. If I click on professional degree is required, I think that means all the other states are then highlighted. So in most, thank you, Ari, for clarifying. In the vast majority of states, you do need that NAB accredited degree. And then, is AXP required? Yes, unless you live in Wisconsin or Maine, or I don't know what states these are. Puerto Rico, Mariana Islands. Okay. And then in some places, additional experience hours are required. This is true in New York State, for example. You actually have to have hours working for a New York State registered architect. So a lot of states will have some very specific requirements in place. And where's the one that there's an additional exam? There's a jurisdiction specific exam in addition to the ARE. So you can see there's a number of states that have it. Including Nevada. So my example from earlier about just applying to Nevada and getting your reciprocal license is not true. You would have to take the Nevada exam as well, presumably. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. I think one other thing that's worth looking at is if we scroll down to the very bottom, they have this link that can't be found anywhere else called fees. You really have to dig on the website to find it. And this is important. So NCARB charges you $100 a year just to keep your record on file. So you establish your record when you want to start recording AXP hours. So let's say you start at your second year of grad school. Then you're going to be paying $100 a year from then until you complete your exams. Then once you get your license, if you decide to have the NCARB certificate so that you get that easy reciprocal licensure in other states, then you start paying $285 a year for the annual renewal fee. Now, if you're a licensed architect working for another firm, oftentimes the firm will pay that fee for you, but it's something to keep in mind. Like I pay that every year. Yasmin pays that every year. So together we are giving NCARB almost $600 a year. And then that's not including state license fees. So usually you have to pay for your initial license and you have to pay every couple of years to renew it. So being licensed costs money. Important thing to note. What I recommend you do is don't apply, don't start your NCARB record until you're ready to start doing AXP. That'll save you money. It also looks like you can let your record lapse for a couple years and then pay the maximum of $200 to renew. So if it takes you like 5 years, I don't understand what the incentive to be would be to pay every year, but just something to note. I'm sure they have some way of making that difficult.
I think that this may be incorrect. It was correct about a year and a half ago. After 6 months, if you haven't logged your hours, they then only count for 50% of the actual hours.
Okay.
So if
So
you're
you
not
did-
consistently logging them, they kind of take them away.
Oh, well, that's not very nice. Okay.
Not very nice, I agree.
They have ways of getting that money out of you. Okay. Okay. So yeah, cost money. The other website that's useful is California Architects Board, cab.ca.gov. And there's lots of information in here about for candidates, for people who have licenses, just how do you get licensed in California. And this website is not quite as up to date as the NCARB one, but it's still pretty useful. And you can basically go in and click on links, becoming a licensed architect. And they tell you everything that you need to do. They'll show you that their application is on here, etc. One thing that's useful on this website is if you do go to becoming a licensed architect, they have this pathways link where again you can look at, if you have a degree from a NAB accredited school, or degree from a non-NAB program, like say if you have a degree from a foreign architecture program, or work experience only. There's also information about the integrated path to architectural licensure, but that's probably not relevant for most people on this call. But yeah, here you can see. So it says you need to do 5 years at 40 hours per week working for an architect licensed in a U.S. jurisdiction. And they have special forms that you need to fill out to verify that experience. And I think that's about it. I think if you click on the experience webpage, that's where you find out that they can give you some credit for a non-NAB degree program in architecture. But you'll have to, like I said, you'll have to contact them to find out exactly what like a Berkeley undergraduate degree in architecture is worth on those terms. So yeah, my experience with corresponding with CAB by email is that they are pretty responsive. I wouldn't pepper them with hundreds of questions and separate emails, but if you do have a question that you cannot find the answer for, I would just try to reach out to them and see if they can give you a response. Okay. That's my presentation. Now I'm happy to take any questions. Okay, well, there's one in the comments. Do you mind explaining how moving to different states works again? If I get a license in New York and want to move to California, do I need to have 3 years of AXP and pass whole difference of different exams to get a license in California, even if I have the license in New York. Okay. So if you have the license, if you have a new, this is exactly my situation because I have my initial license was New York State. And I then moved here and I wanted to get licensed here so we could pursue work in California. And what I had to do was I had my NCARB certificate already. So you do kind of need the NCARB certificate if you're moving between states. And if you don't sign up for it initially, you can sign up for it retroactively, but you have to pay all the fees that you would have paid in the first place. So it's pricey, but it's kind of, I think it's the same amount of money no matter what. So you can kind of think about it that way. So when you apply to California, you fill out the form and submit it, and they'll say, yes, you're eligible, or no, they'll say, no, you're not eligible for whatever reason, or they'll say, yes, you are eligible, but you need to take the California supplemental examination. And then that allows you to go sign up for the exam. That's the extra exam that the state of California has in addition to the ARE. So you don't have to take the ARE again. You don't have to do AXP again. But you do need to take the California specific exam. And then once you do that, then you can get the California license. Other states, it's very simple. Like I think Delaware, for example. Let's say you get a project in Delaware. They don't have a special exam there or anything. All you have to do is send them your NCARB certificate and application and fee, and it usually takes each state a while. It can be like 6 to 8 weeks, probably longer in some places, and then they'll usually just approve you on that basis. Okay. Let's see. Magdalena has a question here. International architectural standing. Does the license translate internationally in any way? Can international architects practice in California without being backed by local licensed architects? Is the pathway similar to landscape architecture? Do licenses overlap in any way? Okay. The last question about landscape architecture, I have no idea. I'm sorry, but you will have to speak to a landscape architect to find that out. Does the well, I will answer that your architecture degree does not qualify you to apply for a landscape architecture license, and vice versa. So you would need to enroll in a landscape Master's of Architecture program or whatever that licensing organization allows in order to do that. The disciplines are actually quite different in many ways, aside from the word architecture. Does the license translate internationally in any way? Yes, it does to certain countries. There are reciprocal agreements between the United States and the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, basically the Anglophone world. You can apply for reciprocal licensure. I would say that practicing in those different locations is probably extremely different. And if it was me, I wouldn't even bother. If I had a project in Australia, I would find an Australian architect to team up with and get them to help navigate permitting process. I think it's the level of difficulty and risk of practicing in a foreign country that you don't have experience actually working in is very high, and probably not a good idea. If you were to move to Australia, then you would then your education, your exams, etc. here would roughly translate over. I think you still have to probably take an additional exam there of some kind. Can international architects practice in California without being backed by a local licensed architect? So let's say you have a B arc from the equivalent of a B arc from a school in I don't know, Italy. You can apply for a US license through NCARB, or you can basically go through the same process as someone who gets a degree from a US school, accredited school. But they are going to want to evaluate your educational background. And so you probably have to submit a lot of paperwork to show them what your degree required. They'll evaluate that and then decide whether that's equivalent to an AAB accredited degree. But there is a pathway. And there's also a pathway for if you already have a license in a foreign country, to getting a license in the United States. I think you still have to take the exams and everything else. But it is somewhat kind of standardized and streamlined. I'm going to answer Avi's question first, and then I'll get to the question about starting your own firm. After a BA and MArch, you still need 3 years of work experience documented through AXP. It's not 3 years, it's just a shorthand. It's a certain number of hours in various like distribution areas, working on schematic design, working on construction administration, that kind of thing. But it took me, I think, roughly 3 years, and I think that's still typically the case, although some people have been able to do it faster. And yes, Ari is right. You can, once you've started your NAB accredited degree, like if you start your master's program, I believe you can get your, you can start your AXP hours, and I think you can start your exams at that point as well. Ari, does that sound right to you?
I don't recall if, so you can definitely start the AXP once you've started the NAB accredited degree. For the exams, I don't know if you're allowed to start those before you finish the degree or not in jurisdictions where a degree is required. Since a degree is not required in California, maybe. I have my MArch
Because you have to have all that work experience.
Because you have to have a NAB accredited degree.
Yeah.
Jurisdiction by jurisdiction, that tool that Aaron had up earlier, not only can you click on the state, but like he showed, you can either click on the state and see all the requirements, or click on the requirement and see all of the states where that applies. I definitely encourage you to just spend time like kind of going back and forth between those two methods and seeing how things like interplay with each other. That's where all of my understanding of this process has come from.
Yeah, honestly, me too. It's like it's really a web of kind of interlocking questions, and there's no way to keep it all completely straight, I think. So the best thing is definitely to just look at the NCARB website and try to figure out what are the criteria that are going to apply to you, and then start working your way through those. One student asked, what does starting your own firm look like? What incentives are there to do this? Any hardships? Well, I mean, starting a firm is quite easy. You can, if someone, let's say you have a friend, let's say a classmate who goes off and starts a Silicon Valley startup, and they say, hey, we need office space. I know you're an architect. Do you want to design something for me. I mean, you basically don't need to do very much to start your own office. You can just, get your software licenses and start designing as a sole proprietor. A sole proprietor is basically an individual person. Um, if you're like planning to hire employees and, start a kind of more formal business, then, it's a little bit more difficult. But you can start incrementally. You can start as a sole proprietor, which is what most people do, and then you can kind of work your way up over time. And then what are the reasons to do it? I mean, I think mostly for me, it's creative freedom. For some people, it might be to make money. It can be, everyone talks about how you don't get paid very well as an architect. You actually get paid fine as an architect, and I think people shouldn't complain quite so much, but about the pay, because it's actually pretty good as jobs go. But as a firm owner, because you're taking on risk, you also can make more profits. And so a lot of people will do it because they want to just make a bit more money. That of course presumes that you are pulling in enough work and managing your business well enough to make that kind of money, but it is possible. And then I think hardships. I mean, it can be as hard or as easy as you want it to be, I guess. I mean, you have to go out and find work, and if work doesn't come along, then you can you just don't have income for a while. So that's something you have to think about, is how are you gonna, and work comes and goes in waves. So you might get like 3 projects all at once and then nothing for a couple of years. So figuring out how to like pace your income is an important question. And I mean, the other thing is that in the end, if there's a problem, the responsibility is on you. So you have to be ready to step up and deal with problems. And sometimes they're quite big problems when they come along. So it's not quite in the scope of this discussion, but it's probably worth worth talking about. It might inform whether or not you want to do it. But I do think that having that kind of creative freedom of practicing on your own is really great, and it's a big motivator for us, at least. Let's see. I'm considering pursuing an MArch in Australia. Would that qualify me to start AXP hours if I return to the US? I think it would. Yes, Ari already answered that you can look at it look at the foreign educated applicant. But I think because Australia is one of those reciprocal licensing countries, that it's probably easier than from somewhere else. They've probably already done an evaluation of the MArch equivalent in Australia. Connie asks, to clarify, for someone with a Berkeley BA in architecture, you need 5 years of work experience plus AXP hours, but the degree can replace some of the 5 years of work experience. Okay. Yes. They won't commit on their website to how many years of the work experience the BA can be understood as a substitute for. I think it's 2 or 3 years of work experience. From what I've heard through the rumor mill. But you would need to contact the California Architects Board and find out what people in your shoes have gotten. But in the end, if you do the BA at Berkeley and then you go into a advanced standing MArch degree, where you only have to do, like if you came back to Berkeley for your MArch, you would go into the 2-year program. So you're talking about 6 years total of education between those two programs. So that's the thing that you're going to want to compare to whatever work experience they suggest to you. Let's see, I've heard that people who have an MArch degree earn higher than people with BArch. What is the average income and the difference? Okay. I don't know. I honestly don't know what the average income for an architect is. Ari, I don't know if you or Mel, if you have any information on that. There's the AIEA has a tool where they tell you what they do a survey, a firm survey every year, I think, where they try to find out salary information. So if you Google like AIA salary tool or something like that, you can find something, and it tells you it's broken down by region, which is important because I think California architects actually make more than like East Coast architects on average. And so it's worth kind of looking at that.
Is that, does it cost? I mean, I think when I've looked for this I've been looking around for this kind of information, and sometimes it's hard to find.
It's free.
Oh, okay, great.
I'll pull it up right now. Hold on.
Yay.
You guys can see my screen. info.aia.org/salary. And if you go to like, it's broken down by position. Recent college graduate, non-licensed. And if you go to Pacific, this is not particularly granular. But yeah, you can see recent college grad median is around, let's say, 65 in Pacific, which is, I don't know, that's got to be at the very least California and Oregon and Seattle, I would assume. And then if you go to something like, I don't know exactly what architect level 3 means, but you can see that then the salary gets closer to $100,000 a year. So I think the problem is that we compare our salaries to like lawyers and doctors, and which makes sense. We go through a similar level of education and etc., taking exams, all of that. But I think like if you look at average median salaries across the US, these are not bad. And I don't know how representative these salaries are, because these are done by voluntary surveys, and so it may not be as objective a data source as you might think.
I can provide a small amount of anecdotal evidence. So I worked at a firm in San Francisco, a small firm of about 20 people. I have an MArch. This was starting in the beginning of like January of 2022. And I just looked up my offer letter because I couldn't remember. I think my starting salary was about 67,000.
Okay.
And I have an MArch degree, and that's in San Francisco. I have no idea what my colleagues who were hired with BA or BArch degrees made. I don't know if it was the same or not. I can just tell you that information, and that is in alignment with what was here at about the 50th percentile in the Pacific region with the recent college grads. So it seems accurate at that level to me anecdotally.
Yeah, I think it's actually even a little higher now, as you might expect. We've gone through some inflation and everything. But let's see. What credentials are generally expected to become a lecturer or professor? Well, I don't know. It depends. Depends on the school. Most places a master's degree in architecture, either a professional degree or a post-professional degree is required. Like usually a B arc is not enough, although in some places it is. And if you want to be a professor of like history and theory or certain kind of building technology positions, a PhD would be expected. But for most architecture teaching positions, master's degree is pretty standard. What else? AIA, Sharon brought up the AIA fees. AIA is separate from all of this. It's just a professional organization. And I think in San Francisco, it's over $1,000 a year right now for membership. But it varies by by location significantly. I was a member in Rhode Island and it was like $600 a year, which is still a lot of money, but it's quite a bit cheaper. Okay. Any other questions?
I just want to make note that it's a few minutes after 3. So I want to respect your time, Aaron.
Yeah, if there's any, I don't see any more questions in the chat. If there's any last question, I can take one more. How important would you say licensure is for construction management and development positions in terms of positioning and knowledge? That's a good question. If you're thinking about going into construction management, I don't think I have a definitive answer. I've worked with, well, one office that I worked in was at one point a joint architecture and development office, which is not unusual because there's so much overlap between the knowledge base for architects and the knowledge base for developers. And it just makes a lot of sense. I've had a number of students now go into real estate development coming out of architecture. And so that's pretty common. Construction management, I don't know as much about. I think knowing building codes is pretty critical for all 3 areas. And so there's probably a decent amount of overlap. I don't know whether the credential of an architectural license is particularly useful if you're trying to get a job in construction management or development.
Thank you. So I'm going to launch the end poll, sorry, to sort of jump right into this. I just want to make, before anybody leaves, if you're willing to answer this poll, I'd really appreciate it. And while you're doing this, Aaron, I just want to say thank you so much. And you, Ari, too, assuming you're here. I can't see for the moment, but I think you're still here, probably, hopefully. Maybe not.
I am.
Okay, good. Yeah. So thank you so much, both of you, for your for your input, your presentation, your jumping in, and I understand Aaron is available for further consultation if needed,
Yeah,
and I can help you. Yeah, I mean, I'm really not an expert on licensure, but I can help you with many other issues that are career development related, and thinking through once you, based on the information that you have, what you want to do, just thinking through your decisions and that kind of thing.
And if
So,
it's to like licensure and graduate school and all of that, feel free to contact me for those specific questions as well.
Great. And Mel had to leave, but I know that he is receptive to, hearing from people too. He's very, an awesome advisor and everything. So, so I'm seeing that The numbers of or the things are looking better. Actually, so wait, let me just, okay, I'm going to share the results. So there's somewhat or very knowledgeable for your level of knowledge around pathways, and mostly somewhat or very confident, and then slightly confident, but understandably, because you have to take into consideration your own thinking and what you want to do. But I think this has just been really a nice way to kind of consolidate and simplify rather than, because it can be kind of overwhelming in making decisions. So again, thank you so much to everybody for being here.
Thanks, my pleasure. And yes, to all the students, feel free to send me an email if you have any additional questions. Great. See you all later.
Yes.